Well, hello. Today we are here with Eric Lea from Robert Half Talent Solutions. And Eric and I have known each other for a while. We were together at a chamber group in Fort Collins, Colorado. And Eric, you have such an amazing presence of professionalism around you. And I was excited to be able to have you on the show to talk about salary trends.
Thank you, Marie, and it's great to see you again. We miss you here in Colorado.
Yes. I miss being there for sure. Although, Utah's not bad. It's pretty and nice here too, but always miss those connections. So
Absolutely.
We are going to be talking about salary today. I'm going to try to share my screen here and see if we can do this without making it freeze. And we will see where we end up. I pressed the wrong button. New system. Okay, so Robert Half puts out this salary information. Do they do this every year?
We do. We put it out every September, so companies can use it towards their budgets when they're building their budgets. But this year will be the first year, 2022, that we're going to do adjustments throughout the year. So late Q1, we'll do an adjustment because it's obviously 100% digital. So, yep. It's been going on. We've had it out for about 40 years, give or take. We've been doing it.
Wow.
Yep.
And what are some of the kind of highlights that you would give us around this data?
Quite a few things, and it is available to anybody at roberthalf.com. So feel free to jump in there. You can. So Robert Half specializes in quite a few different areas: IT, legal, creative, accounting, finance, administrative, HR. And so that's where the guide drives towards, is those types of professions. I would say 2021, and certainly my knowledge is distinct to Colorado, but 2021 saw I saw salaries rise quicker during the year than typically you'll see adjustments, and suddenly the next year you'll see it. But during the year, it was jumping 2 to 4 to 5% for any given role. And then, nationally, I think we just came out, unemployment rate's 3.9% nationally. If you're 25 years or older and have a college degree in anything, unemployment rate is 2.1.
Wow.
Nationally. And so then you want to dig down into your specific market. And I would say here in Colorado, along the Front Range, that, Denver Metro up north, it's probably like 1.5%. with a college degree over 25 years old. So the market is an employee-driven market today. That's the number one thing that comes out. I would say salaries overall, depending on what specialty you had, the top roles in demand up there, which is a great tool, probably jumped anywhere from 3 to 8%, depending on which type of role.
Yeah, and they're going up fast, and we've seen some predictions of like 10%. How are you, are there different industries, or what is driving some of that, or how could we help our clients kind of know if this is impacting them or not?
The top 5 industries since COVID nationally, government, for obvious reasons, right? We had the PPP loans coming down for individuals. Unemployment offices certainly they were hiring contractors left and right to be able to get the money out the door. So government, nonprofits, which is interesting, right? So nonprofits, more clients to help. Ironically, what we also saw is their fundraising was easier. They're actually getting more fundraising done easier than any time before. And I think what they were seeing is there are people that weren't affected due to COVID that gave more. So less people gave, but gave more. So nonprofits, government, financial services. So low interest rates on the mortgage side, and certainly with all the funding coming through the banks on the lending side. Light manufacturing. Certainly, if you see e-commerce, that was pretty big too. I think that's always going to be a driver just with technology and internet sales. And then depending on certain areas, you saw also areas around trying to think of this nationally here. I would say others would be like business services, professional services. Somebody like you, or somebody a CPA or an accountant, maybe financial savings type people. So as people were looking at their money more, those areas. So those are the areas that were driving the economy. Certain areas of manufacturing got hit hard due to COVID, as we saw. They got shut down. I can think of Woodward here shut down all of their government run type aerospace. They're back up and running. But then there are other parts of manufacturing. I can think of agricultural type stuff that were just going crazy as, we're sitting at home buying more food and that sort of thing. So ag actually did really well throughout the pandemic as well. So
interesting.
Yeah.
And we were talking a little bit offline that in addition to this salary, one of the other trends that you're seeing is an increase in benefits and kind of creativity there. What are you seeing there?
Yeah. So a couple things. I would say some of the roles that really spiked during COVID and still is spiking is human resources. And so I think that's smart for companies to do and they were targeting more employee relations. So companies were realizing, hey, I need my people taken care of, right? I need to retain them. And so I need more hands on deck to be able to pinpoint them. And I'm certainly talking about larger organizations. Smaller organizations that maybe did HR functions through multiple leaders are now hiring somebody alone to do that if it's under 50 employees. So that's a great thing. And part of that was, hey, I've got my workers demanding stuff. So just to give you an idea, benefits most wanted by employees: health insurance, paid time off, 401ks, simple IRAs, and then dental. Most employers were giving health, paid time off, retirement plans, but also life and AD&D insurance. So there's the dental, and the last piece is different. The other thing, due to the pandemic, their employees are demanding flexible schedules. So is that 4 days and then 3-day weekend? Is that a hybrid system? Certainly remote work options, either 100% all remote, hybrid. I would certainly say that you're seeing a lot of companies go hybrid. The other piece I think is a blessing due to the pandemic is the fact that these small businesses who never would have done this, had they not been forced, are realizing it worked. And so if I've got a sick kid at home and my job for the most part is on site, but I can do it remotely, I may not have to take time off for my sick child. I can work from home. So that's a benefit. Employee discounts with larger organizations, and then paid parental leave is starting to spike, and that's more on the male side. So paternity leave is starting to come through in benefits. And then the other major benefit we're seeing is mental health. So I think that's the other positive around the pandemic, is it's being talked about more within organizations, and organizations are putting money behind it. So those are the few things that we're seeing.
Yeah. And we have our colleague Murray here who's asking, in addition to some of the other HR roles that you talked about, are you seeing more hiring for diversity, equity types of jobs?
Absolutely. Yeah. In fact, we've been talking about Robert Half hired a DE&I director 4 years ago. We've been talking about it for years. The cool thing about Robert Half is we were just listed by Forbes as the top place to work for women. We have more women employees than men. Top place to work for minorities. So it has actually been, over the last year, the number one topic I even here in Fort Collins, which is wonderful. And so it's all around the house that everybody's trying to learn today. And how do you post jobs? Where do you post jobs that maybe you can bring in different cultures? What we found through some of our surveys and our research is that companies are more profitable when they have better culture within their organizations, or in a department, or within an office. And more people work harder for each other in those situations than it's just one type of worker, if that makes sense. So yes, good question.
Yeah, that inclusion and the business case for being inclusive has really helped people see that this isn't about any specific group. It's about everybody feeling welcome at the table, and that makes everybody happier and more happy to work. So
Yep, that's right. Yeah, and I think the other thing that's important, obviously retention is a big issue today. And we talked offline about culture. The companies that build their cultures driven from their people tend to do better, right? Versus it's driven from the top down. So if the people can build that culture, and so if you have a really cool DE&I practice, that actually helps even more. It's not all about money, about why people leave. Interesting fact, 85% of workers who accept a counter offer, so they walk in the door, give their notice, I'm accepting another job, they get a counter and they stay. 85% of those people who accept leave within the next year, right?
Oh, wow.
And that's because their original job search was not money driven. However, suddenly they get a 20% bump or 10% bump, and all of a sudden they're seeing stars, and they're forgetting why they originally wanted to leave that organization.
Yeah, or maybe they think that money means that they are going to respect me now, right? Or
right,
they are going to do
right,
the money's not just the money, and then it turns out that the money
right,
was just the money.
right. That's right. It could be around culture, professional development, professional growth. Professional growth may not necessarily mean a bigger title. That can mean, hey, I want to learn to do something different, or I want to learn to do something else. But culture and the professional growth and the benefits are typically above salary as to why people accept or why people leave, typically.
Yeah, and as you said, November, record number of people quitting their jobs. And we
Yep.
were chatting a little bit back and forth about where people are going, and you had some great data about that as well.
Yeah, so in 2021 and 2020, probably late 2020, more people started their own business than ever before in the U.S. And that's I can speak to Colorado as well. That matched here in this state. And so, could that just be a one-person consulting business? Absolutely, it could be. You're seeing people. You're seeing people maybe start an LLC because they have a hobby that they want to do. We were talking about one specific hobby ahead, which is a strange way. The other thing, people are going back to school. And maybe getting the bachelor's if they haven't gotten that, or even additional education certifications or masters. And then you have a heavy retirement, right? So you've got more jobs than there are people. And so, however, I always tell folks it's all about fit. When you find your next place, we've all interviewed people, and you should be interviewing that company just as much as they're interviewing you, because you're 8 to 10 hour days, you're working for this organization. You want to be happy there.
Well, and I think too, we look at the millions of opens of job, but that doesn't necessarily mean that the competition is low for the job that you want.
Mhm.
And I don't know if you've seen, have the number of applications for some of your jobs gone down? Has it stayed pretty much the same?
It's gone up. However, typically what I see is the skills or education don't match at all.
Mm,
Additionally, with the ability to work with some of our roles that we work on are remote and or hybrid, I'm seeing more influx of folks from out of the state apply.
mm.
90% of my remote jobs, typically the employer who's here local wants to have a local candidate. They may be going back in the office within the next year, or from a culture driven type of environment, they may want to get together here and there as a team, even though it could be 100% remote job. So that's typically what we're seeing. But I've seen definitely more. I would say it's just not a lot that are hitting the skill sets required.
Yeah, so it's interesting. More applications, and you hit on a really big point that people don't understand about remote work. And this was from Flex Jobs data that like 95% of remote jobs have some kind of geographic requirement, whether that's local or at least, in the state or in the region. And I don't think people understand that. They see remote job and think, oh, I could work from anywhere. But you're just kind of validating that that's not necessarily true.
Correct. Yeah. Now there are jobs that don't require that. More the high tech area, right? So some high tech companies are seeing some retention issues around some San Francisco type tech based companies taking their top software engineers here. Now, it's interesting to note, if you're an employer and let's say you recruit somebody from outside the area. If I'm recruiting you, Marie, from Utah, am I using salaries around Fort Collins, or am I using salary trends around Utah? It's a weird conundrum. Most of the time, the companies are going to typically use where the location of their corporate office is originally, typically, not all. So that's another thing when you're negotiating salary, and if you're in a remote job, to understand and be part of the conversation when you're potentially accepting a job like that.
Yeah, and let's talk about negotiation. So
Sure.
when we think about salaries going up and I want to negotiate to get more salary now, is this a good thought? Like, is this a good thought process that salary trends are going up, so therefore I should be able to negotiate for more? Is that a false thought?
No, I think it's a good thought. I think it's a good thought. But certainly companies historically, what year over year, certainly give cost of living adjustments in 3 to 4%, and I would say this year it's probably pushing 4 plus, depending on market. I always tell people on salary negotiations, or if I'm currently employed, raises, you need to go in there with ammo. Just because the market is great doesn't mean I've earned it. Right. So if I'm walking into my leader's office, I should have some distinct stuff that I was able to achieve this year that warrants that raise. And I always tell job seekers, as well as those negotiating a raise, talk about ROIs, so return on investment. So what did I do for that company or for that department or for that manager that saved them time and money, right? So I want to get quantifiable versus getting more. We always hear the words, I'm a quick learner and I'm a hard worker. Well, that doesn't tell me anything, right? So here's what I did this year. I may not know the dollar figure I saved a company or made the company. However, that my audience will understand, if that makes sense. So you want to walk in the door with, hey, I managed more people this year than I've ever managed before, and they're all doing well. I didn't have any retention issues within my department, right? That's something that I think you should be proud of. That's quantifiable, right? Nobody left. So you do want to walk in the door with some ammo.
Yeah, and this is important, and there's kind of different schools of thought on this one. Do you recommend people try to negotiate along with their annual review, or is it better to set a time outside of that conversation?
It's a good question. I don't think there's a right or wrong way. Where there are certainly organizations or departments or leaders that don't have an annual review, I would force the issue. So create that meeting. I like to do it twice a year, right? Have a couple stops. Maybe the one in the middle of the year is a little bit minor check-in. I meet with my individual team members once a week. That's their time with me. Because I want to hear how they're doing, if there's anything I can help them with. I think I would demand those of your leaders. If suddenly, to do it offline of that type of meeting is not a wrong thing, I would also recommend not making that an annual, just always walking in the door for a raise. Every time Eric walks in the door, he's asking for a raise, right? That actually burns out a manager pretty quickly.
Yeah. And then this was a really good question from one of our colleagues, Angela Watts, who said, we might be tempted right now to kind of negotiate the highest salary or negotiate, the highest salary in my department or in my area. But that also could have a negative impact because then you're the highest paid, so you might be first to go.
Sure.
I just thought that was an interesting point. I don't know what thoughts you have around her question.
Yeah, I love that question, and I don't know the answer. I don't have a silver bullet for that one because every situation's different. Here's the thing to me when it comes to salaries. You should be paid according to your skills, your education, and your experience. Number one, right? And if the market is telling you something, then maybe that's a discussion you need to have with your leader, again, with ammo, right? I always tell people, yes, when there are layoffs, they look at those folks that aren't doing well. Number one, they look at certainly salaries. What's this costing me? But I always tell people, if you're doing a great job, then maybe you should ask for it, right? Now, I wouldn't walk in the door saying, hey, the market is great. I think I deserve a raise. Again, without that ammo. So there's no right or wrong answer to that. It'd be interesting to, note somebody who's, is that type of position typically laid off first, right? You also kind of want to know your industry and your company historically. So yeah, I mean, again, if the market's talking about it, it may be good to bring it up.
Well, and I think too, as you pointed out, when some careers or some jobs, maybe HR, we know some of those roles are first to go. I might have a different approach of, hey, I'm going to get the highest salary I can
Yeah,
now
today,
because
sure.
I know that I'm going to be the first laid off regardless. So I'm going to do what I can now. And I know you said that your team has grown, right? Recruiting has been one of those booming careers right now
Yep.
too.
Yep. Yeah. HR and recruiting, and the employee relations type of driven HR person is going through the ranks. If you have a degree in IT, degree in accounting and finance, those two specific areas are the hottest jobs across the country. Those specific areas. So again, it is a nutty market, but again, it's not all about money. So
Right.
yep. So I
And I
mean,
think that
go ahead. Sorry.
well, I was just going to say, as a job applicant or even someone asking for a raise, to me, it's important that we keep that mindset too, that if we make it too much about money, we may kind of shoot up a red flag in the hiring manager's mind or our boss's mind because they know it's more about culture than money. And if
Yep.
we're pushing for money, they might say, well, I'm not sure this person is happy here. And there's just a fine balance there between negotiating and using this time to make sure you're paid competitively
Right.
versus overemphasizing that point.
Yeah, I totally agree with you there, and I think um, um, I also think that culture is critical, and how we treat our people is critical. To your point, right? And so I want a leader that pushes me, but also listens. If I have a suggestion to improve something's going on personally in my life that I need a little bit of a break. Through COVID, certain organizations just overwork their people, and they did so by not bringing on additional talent, maybe even on the interim side to support the work. And so you got all these people that got burnt out, and they're like, "Screw it, I'm out." Right. And so that's where we saw the influx coming in November, and it's like, hey, my organization didn't treat me well during COVID. I don't want to work for an organization like that. So great. When you're interviewing, how are you going to interview so you know what that culture is like, right? How are you? So those questions are critical during the interview. I just had a person, I offered him a job today, and he said, she wouldn't budge on the hours. I wanted to work 7:30 to 3:30. She said it's 8 to 5. So those organizations that are not flexible are losing good people, right? And so, if you're a leader or hiring, the flexibility is key. I have another client who's pretty type A personality, and she's been that way for 25 years. She's a great operations director. One of my candidates we just placed there a permanent job, and she goes, she needs to go to California to visit her mom once a month. And so I said, fine, I'll bring you on and I'll allow you to do that. She goes, I would never have done that 3 years ago. So this push of flexibility is happening, and those organizations that aren't flexible are losing.
Yeah, and it is so hard for people who've been more, as you said, kind of that type A, work is work and home is home.
Mm-hmm.
And I find people of all ages that have that mindset, but it does tend to be more of the maybe Gen X and boomer mentality, or people that have just been in the workforce for a long time. But then that shift and making that shift is important to be effective today as a leader. And I think a lot has been put on leaders during COVID. I mean, they're people too,
Mm-hmm.
but
Right.
they've also been challenged to shift, to do it differently, and to create this flexibility, which, I mean, as a leader, I can see that creates a lot of chaos if you've got all these different things that you're trying to juggle and you just have to let go a little bit
Right.
and make it happen. So I'm interested that you're seeing some of that too.
Right. And the other thing is, right, the balancing from an HR perspective, your world, right? If you give this person one thing, you're going to have to give it to everybody else, right? And so that's an important from an equity standpoint. Is like, why is this person getting flex time or can work remotely and I can't? What's the deal here? So you're going to have to evaluate all your positions. Now, certainly in construction, right? If you're a project manager, the work's on site, right? So
Right.
certainly some roles can't be remote. So one interesting note, I had There was one company, and we saw it recently, where they were giving unlimited PTO,
Mm.
and it didn't work. They actually, his staff took less time off and he felt like, for a few reasons. One is they were worried about losing their job, so they had to train somebody to do what they were doing if they took a week or 2 or 3 off, and so they're fearful of that. Number two is, just from a mental standpoint, they just felt like, no, I can't take that much time off, and so they just didn't. And then they got overworked, so he had to take that off and reinstitute standard PTO.
Yeah, people kind of like the measuring stick. I've seen that
Yeah,
a lot, that,
that's
if I
right.
have 2 weeks, I'll take 2 weeks. But if you say it's unlimited, it's like, well, how much do I have?
That's right. That's right. Am I
Got
taking
it.
advantage of my company, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
So it just didn't work for him. I thought that was interesting. So
So Lynn is saying that, and we talked about this in our white paper too, making sure that you keep what you're doing in writings, as you mentioned earlier, having those proof points,
yep.
and making sure that we're speaking to that. And then Murray had popped in here. What are people doing to improve that candidate experience? You've mentioned a few things, but love to hear more about that. Thank you, Murray. It's a great question.
Yeah. And Lynn, 100% agree. I always tell people, also keep your LinkedIn profile up to date. Companies do look at that. So that'd be the other thing. Great question. I was just doing a presentation on this last week, and one company was stating, she was like, I'm seeing less applicants in our system. And I'm like, the problem with these large systems is these candidates aren't getting feedback, right? So they're sending in their resume and then not hearing a dang thing. And then, to your point, Murray, what are they doing on an onboarding experience? The small to medium companies are doing better than the large companies. So they're interacting with these job seekers quicker. That's one thing that they've learned over COVID is, and due to the lack of worker, is if they move too slow, they're done. So they're moving quicker. They're involving more of their workforce in the interview process. So it could be a peer of yours that may help onboard you, versus an HR person. So the HR is involved. Maybe they'll bring a peer and then maybe add a mentor to that. I think those are great things. Again, I always tell people this: 90% of your next job is through your network versus blindly applying online. So the more people you know and more talk about your job search, certainly if it's confidential, that's a different story. But the more you talk about, the more you talk to your network about, hey, I'm actually looking for a career change, the more you're apt to get into another company.
And are you seeing companies try to kind of pare down their online application process and look at how fast that happens, or have they still not? I mean, this has been a discussion from
forever.
Like
Yeah.
10 years. 10 years. People
No.
have been talking about, you got to simplify that online application.
No. And the other avenue, right, is you got Indeed. You can quick apply to 20 jobs with one click, right? And so that's less personal. And so I'm not seeing that change. However, I'm seeing the speed change. Like, hey, we want to go through the 3-step process, and then we need to test you and do this. And I'm telling these folks, you cannot take 8 weeks to hire. You cannot be government hiring. And right now it is government hiring, meaning if somebody posts a job today, before somebody's in the chair, it's probably 8 to 12 weeks. When 4 years ago, it was 4 to 6 weeks. So that's crazy, right? So you guys they're just doing too much. And so the small to medium companies are adjusting quicker.
Yeah. And are you seeing, I mean, obviously a lot of virtual interviewing. How are companies doing at virtual onboarding? Are they getting better at this?
They are.
Their
Yeah,
new employees?
they truly are. We put out some stuff for our clients on how to do it better. I would say 50-50, they're interviewing virtually. They may interview virtually round one. And then if the role is on site or hybrid, they're bringing that person on site, because you do interview differently in person than you do virtually. And then on the onboarding process, it is smooth. They're doing trainings online better. So their maybe HR process is day one, and then maybe they meet with their leader day two. I would say yes, companies are figuring that out and doing a great job.
Yeah, still some long interview processes out there. I just saw someone on LinkedIn talking about a 7-step process, and our friend here is talking about a 5-step hiring process. Yeah. And companies are nervous about hiring the wrong people because it is a culture thing, and costs money to have turnover, but they've got to find a happy medium, right?
Yeah. It does. And the cost of to rehire is 65% of the salary. So if you bring somebody on, train them for a month, they bolt, it's going to cost about 65% of that salary to bring somebody new on. So it is expensive, and the companies that do it right and do it well or adjust quickly are winning.
Yeah. Well, this has been so much fun. Thank you for coming on. It's been so fun to see you. It's been a while, and we appreciate you sharing your insights with us, Eric.
Thank you, Marie. It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. Thank you for tuning in. We have our career coaching program coming up. So if you want to help these folks who are quitting their jobs and trying to figure out what's next, that's what we do. We give you a process to do that and the worksheets and activities that you can lead someone through to do that career exploration and decision making. So please think about joining us for that if you're seeing more of those clients or want to see more of those clients. And you can let me know if you have any questions. But thank you again, Eric, and we'll see you back here next Tuesday, everyone. Thank you.